excited to be here. My head is buzzing with questions. I don't know where to start from. But I think my heart and my goal behind this conversation was just for us to meet on a face-to-face level about what does it mean to say yes. And I've sometimes during Men's Monday sessions that we have, I told them that sometimes when we hear a word, our first question is, but what does that look like though? As men, we need to see it in order to sometimes believe it. So I just want to throw it out there to anybody there. Like, what did it mean for you to say yes? Anyone can answer.
I'll tell you something. The first thing I will say is how God created a man. And ladies, don't be jealous. I can come to you later on. But for the men, you are the one genius that God created. A man, male, is a genius. A woman is the most unique person, whatever, that God created. Most unique. And it ties to the question you ask. Why? That was what the Lord told me. He said, I did not make a man. I formed him. I made a woman, but a man I formed. That means I put everything together, and he was there. And I created everything, and this man on his own gave everything a name. Do you know how difficult is it for him to name everything God created? That's a genius. And then not only that, he said he's a great communicator. He now had to communicate that to the woman. Everything that he had named. And it's from there that I have my practical answer to what does it practically mean to say yes? It's first to look deep into yourself. Who am I? The first place is, as a man, a male created by God, you must first know that there's a genius in you. You didn't put it there. It's how God formed you. You're a genius as a man. And it's from that place then, you now look to your own self. So what are my own natural skill sets? Because it's the thing that God gives you that he will use to help you say yes. That's why I gave you my own example. My own example, my eye for the lady, that thing was so strong that it was part of what God used practically to get me to say yes. So there's some things in your life that you think is bad. It could be your drink or your smoke that you think is so bad that very thing you're smoking is also it varies from person to person. But the very thing that makes up who you are is always what God practically uses to grab you. And for me, that's what I found out. He used everything of who I am. That's why my saying yes practically was different from my brothers. And I have 5 of them, and we are all ministers. But we became ministers and said yes, different ways.
Shall I go here? The first thing that came to mind, because I was thinking about it when I was on my way here, and the first thing that came to mind was my salvation. And that being the most, if I really think about it, that being the most practical and most obvious answer for what it means to say yes. But then I thought about that as a journey, that what does that look like? And as we were praying today, the word that kept on coming to mind was to be broken. And that brokenness and that weakness being something that in my natural man, in my flesh, in my confidence in myself, I'm not used to that. I don't like that. I'm not used to that. I'm used to control. I'm used to knowing where I'm going. I'm used to being able to direct my life. And so the one thing salvation did, and the journey of God or journey with God, as you referenced, is sweep that under the carpet. That is no more. We no longer live our life based on my own strength. But actually, if I'm being brutally honest, my actual salvation, I didn't know that that's what I was saying yes to. I remember being in a season where, and I've kind of done it all. I've done all the badness, all of the things. And I got to a stage in my life where I was running my business and I was doing motivational speaking. And on the outside, everything looked really, really nice. Everything seemed to be going quite well. But I was empty. There was something void and there was something going weird. And I'm generally the type of person that wakes up in the morning and is bouncing off the walls, really, really excited. And I was going through a season in my life where it was like, something's missing. What's going on? And things were starting to happen around me. My twin sister got saved. My cousin, who I was in Croatia with Doing a Madness, who I know to be probably one of the maddest people that I know, not to out your business, but who I know to be one of the maddest people I know, is now doing 180-degree turns, and is inviting me to church. I was like, what's going on? This is very strange. What's happening? And one day I woke up in the morning, and when I woke up that morning, I felt such a heavy burden. The burden was so heavy, I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I need to address this. I need to fix this. And my sister was walking past my room, and she was like, why don't you just try coming to church today? I was like, you know what, whatever, I might as well just try it. Went to church. I'd never been up for an altar call in my life. But that day I went to church, pastor said, God said there's some people in this room who you feel like there is a burden on you, come to the front. I was like, wait, what? What kind of black magic is this that my man knows what's going on in my life? I was like, you know what, let me just go to the front anyway. Went to the front, and Pastor Joe just said, speak out to God. Let's see what happens. Just speak to him. And I said, God, what's going on? Like, why am I feeling this burden? Why don't I know what's happening next? I'm usually a visionary. I don't know what's happening. I'm feeling broken. And I just heard such a clear and distinct voice that said back, because you're not supposed to be the one that's in control. You're not supposed to be the one that has all the answers. Lean on me. And I went to my cousin and I said, I don't know what it is, but I can feel a light inside of me that I've never felt before. Like, and I think I said to him, I was almost in tears, how do I give my life to Christ? And he was like, and he just pulled me to the side. And I realized that journey, I thought my testimony was that one moment. But that was just almost, if you imagine an onion, that was the first skin being peeled off the onion. Now, as I've gone on that journey, God is starting to reveal what saying yes is now taking me to. And so I said to someone the other day, your purpose is not something that you go and find. It's not something that you go looking for. Your purpose is something that you unearth because you were born with it inside of you. Your role is to look deep down inside of you by looking up to God and find it. And as a result of that, it will be unearthed. So I think that saying yes is almost like a catalyst for the journey that we need to go on. And it's something that will consistently be learned as we go on that journey. It's not a one moment kind of thing.
As an overview, I would say for me, saying yes is surrendering myself to God's sovereignty, knowing that he's called me to a life of full service. And what do I mean by that for myself? I think growing up where everything you pursue, growing up in Peckham, South East London, everything that you pursue and understand is that only the strong survive. But then strength is now depicted as a form of pride. And pride now becomes the idol that you worship because everyone sees you like, you're saying, cool. What are you saying? You're cool. And now you can either use that to intimidate people or influence people in a particular way. That's not to say I lived a gangster lifestyle, whatever, but pride now becomes the position and the thing that I believe as all men, to some degree, we craved after. And I think for me, as I began to look at that, God literally had to slap me in university to let me know that your pride is always taking you to the dead end. Your pride is always taking you to a place of pain. Your pride is always taking you off the path of righteousness into the path of the enemy's hands. And I was like, so God, what do I do here? So my pursuit of knowing Christ came from seeing God work in other people's lives. So for me, God knew that my pride was a major issue in my life. And him knowing that pride was a major issue in my life, I started seeing that when you're in university and everyone respects you, but now what happens, you're doing 7 years of architecture and then you're having to redo your second year because even though you passed your first year with flying colors, you still go into the following year with the bad habits from the first year. See, so I've carried the bad habits, but now I have to redo some of the coursework and I have to redo my second semester. So now all my friends have left. But prior to that, I went to Chelsea University of the Arts because I wasn't sure what field of creative arts I wanted to do, architecture, car design, interior design. So now people have left and I'm 3 years behind. So all the people that have now come into university are the people I used to see that were youngers on road. Yeah, what are you saying? I'm like, how did you even get into this university? Like, who born you? Who brought you here? And I think gradually I started seeing my cousin get saved. A young lady who was having sickle cell crisis every month. And then now seeing her give her life to Christ and no sickle cell crisis at all. Seeing friends, I would listen to music in the car. They're playing some Lecrae or Christian music. I'm like, what's this corny jargon? What are you listening to? I'm like, go and put on some Rick Ross. Huh? And I'm like, why are you listening to all this? And gradually, they're like, no, this is Christian hip-hop. Who cares about Christian hip-hop? Like, I didn't understand it. And gradually, I think God knew in order to open my eyes, he needed to put me in a place where my pride could no longer sustain me. And when I realized that, it took me to a place where I had to say, you know, who is this Jesus man? Growing up in a Christian household is different from being in God's household. And I think from there, I began to try and know who God was. And I tried to disprove God. And then I got into business. And then the more I got into business, the Holy Spirit started saying, you've got these areas of business that you can speak to your team like this, understand serving your business team like this. But Jesus came to wash his disciples' feet. Why do you still neglect this man called Jesus? So God used everything I was pursuing to show me more of his nature and more of him. And that's when I wanted to really go and study apologetics, epistemology, theology, and all these things to kind of understand who is this God man called Jesus. And in doing that, not knowing that there's a way that seems right to a man, but you know what? God will always order his steps, and he began to order my steps. And if there's a guy I just want to remember, I'll never forget his name. His name is not Daniel, Jermaine Lopez. And he saw me once upon a time in church, an old church I was going to, and he used to look at me like, you're gonna be a preacher someday. You're this man there. I was like, bro, please keep it moving. I've just come to church, tithe and offering. I'm ready to move on. And gradually, I always remember his voice, because the Holy Spirit says, you're just running. How long are you going to run for before you run out of steam? And then when God began to show me that to come to him and to say yes is willing to serve sacrificially to the world through his sovereignty, that's one of the greatest gifts we can do. Why? Because there is no more serving and salvation in heaven. So it's an opportunity for us to do it now. So that's my yes.
I think for me, saying yes is a continuous thing. And having the difficulty of speaking, not loving who I was a huge intimidation for myself. Because what started to happen was I didn't trust my own ability. And in not trusting my own ability, I kind of isolated myself and pushed myself away from everybody because I hated the way I sounded. But yet the very thing that God gave me was to prophesy, was to declare the word of the Lord, yet I hated this thing so much. And at the age of 17, now you must understand I come from South Africa. I don't come from privilege. I come from the projects. I had my own gang at 17. This is a story I don't share much about. But we are dealing with men and choices we make. The choices I made, or the yes I said in the community that informed my intellectual stimuli and my intellectual decisions was primarily down to the poverty that we were facing. One of the things, or one of the keys, or one of the yeses that I had to continuously say going through life is that I'm accepted. I am loved. And my yes has to coincide with that. But it didn't happen overnight. It happened continuously. That's what I'm saying. Your yes is going to have to be continuous, not just once. And I started to learn that sometimes if the yes is not a part of your life, we live from the place called ideals. Ideals are informed by vain imaginations. And because we have vain imaginations, these imaginations inform our decisions, our yes. So this is what was happening in my life. Until I had an encounter with God where I was left undone. Where I had to say yes because where I was going was not a good place. And 1997, the 7th of July, I said yes. I said yes, and slowly but surely, God had to, like Carl said, remove the layers, the onions, had to remove it. But in removing it, it had to be a continuous yes.
Well, particularly my yes is a matter of obedience in spite of. Am I going to let my flaws or my sin dictate whether I say yes or no? And you will get that. And as men, sometimes we will hold up our flaws as a marker to why we cannot obey. when in fact God called us while we were flawed. And he called us while we were in sin. And so our sin as an excuse is redundant to God. So that's the second thing. Then 8 months late after my salvation, I knew I had to make our relationship holy. So it's better to marry than to burn. That's Paul's premarital counseling. I said we're going to get married. And we didn't have the money. We didn't have the resources at all. I'm 20 years old. She's 18. We're too young to get married. And my family told me that. I'm a baby in the family. So my family were just on me. You're making a big mistake. But I knew it was God's will. So that was my second obedience in spite of what your peers say, in spite of what your family says. Will you obey the direction that God is leading you in? And then the last one is concerning when I started full-time ministry. Next year will be 15 years. And I remember the contract, for 40 hours per week, and the salary was £16,000 per annum. And I was like, I actually said to my pastor at the time, I said, is this it? And he said, son, God will fill in the rest.
Religious. Jeez.
Like, sometimes your yes may look like an apparent demotion.
Wow.
Or regression.
Wow.
But will you say yes in spite of? And so that's what I want to challenge you, men of God, today. Is that sometimes the yes may not look like the full picture, as Rev Ade was saying, but it will be worth it in the end.
Amen.
For me, like what was said before, yes is something we have to say every single day. It's a continuous, conscious decision we have to commit to, because yes comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. But nevertheless, the cost at which it comes, you have the resources and the capability to pay that cost, because God has deposited the resources inside you. But it will come at a cost but you buy something for the future that you will need. I don't know if that's making sense. It will come at a cost, but it will enable you to buy something that you don't already have. A practical example is that you go to Sainsbury's and you buy snacks. The reason why you buy snacks is because you're hungry. You have the money, you have the resources available. But money, you can't eat money. But you're going to give what you have in exchange to buy something that you need. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. So the cost of your yes is painful. Very painful at times. You go through different seasons. But knowing that whatever you pay, God will never, how should I say, destabilize the equation. You always receive almost tenfold or 30, 60, 100-fold more than what you paid. And it will afford you and buy you something that you don't have. But when you pay it, you will get the thing that you need. I remember hearing something a while ago, and in terms of my personal journey, I'm at a different place, because being a Christian for a while, a lot of the things that I prayed for is happening in my life now. And back in the days, I would know when you have no money, you're going to college, you have a lot of time. So you do your all night, every night, you pray, you can study the word 5-6 hours and all of that. You can do all of that. But as you get older in Christ, I began to see the friends I started with are not the friends that are with me today. People were picking off one by one. And I began to see these changes, and I still had to say yes despite, and set my face as a flint. Despite whatever is happening, I've got to stay faithful to wherever God has called me to.
But also, I also want to encourage somebody to say that you might have seen blessings, because a lot of times when we talk about Christianity, a lot of us are going through trials. Yes, I understand that. But what would you still say yes when you're still being blessed? Because a lot of the time, we say yes, believing it's an absolute. God will heal me. But if you don't see the manifestation of the healing yet, you still believe that God can and he will. But even if he does not, I'll still say yes. So I want to encourage everybody here that even if God can and do all the things, all our dreams, imaginations, and everything, but despite it all, even if he doesn't, I will still say yes. Hallelujah.
Emmanuel?
I'll try and be quick because I know everyone has said something. So just piggybacking off the last point about Daniel, one of the things that I love about that is that story is the culture, the system said at the sound of all these instruments, I'm just taking it a bit deeper, the sound of all these instruments played in sync, everyone bow. They said, no, we're not going to do it. And even if God doesn't, we're still not going to do it. So they're thrown into the fire, and it's in the midst of the fire that God is revealed. So they were thrown into the fire was intensified, all of that stuff. But this is what I find interesting. Who told the king that God had a son? Because the king said, I see a fourth man, like the Son of God. So it's in the midst of your yes and the pressures and the intensities of life that people begin to see Christ. So when Paul is saying, I travail that Christ might be formed in you, the yes, the pressures that come with it will manifest the Christ that lives on the inside of you. And that's where God is bringing many of us to. Because with our words and with our lifestyle, we've not demonstrated Christ. And so with our yes is like our bond to him. It's our vow to him to say, okay, cool, this is really what it is. For me, both my parents were in ministry. And so growing up, obviously, members saying, oh yeah, Emmanuel, you're going to be like your dad. You're going to be a great preacher. You're going to be a great speaker. And Ade knows my dad very well. So you just get pushed into that. And for me, when I was 14 years old, God spoke to me about my mandate, about an apostolic mandate in cities around the globe. I didn't really have language. I didn't understand the fivefold. I only knew pastor and evangelist. So I didn't really have context for that. Anyway, when I was fast forward, I went to uni and I started feeling under intense pressure, like I was pouring out into people and I wasn't getting it back. And then at that time, I got a random call from someone called Dr. Hugh Osgood, who said to me, Emmanuel, the call on your life is very great. Like, forget your dad. Like, you're not going to walk in his footsteps, like in his shadows, but God has called you to something. And I was like, but I don't want to be a pastor. I don't want to be a church leader. I don't want to be wherever you're trying to say I'm going to be. And so I ran away. I ran away for 2 years. And everywhere where I was running to, everywhere where I was trying to I was just not necessarily out of the will of God. I was just trying to run away from the assignment God had called me to. I don't know if any of you have been in that predicament where you're still praying, you're still going to church, but you don't want to do what God has asked you to do because it's too big. That's what I was doing. I was running away. But everywhere I was going, roadblock, roadblock, roadblock. So at the end of the 2 years, I said, God, you know what? This is it. I'm not running away from you. If you're doing roadblocks for me everywhere I'm going, it must mean that there's something important about the assignment that you've placed on my life. Not that I'm necessarily important than anyone else, but it must mean if you're chasing me this much, it must mean you have something for me. So anyway, like, okay, well, you've been in church, you've been groomed very well, you know the scriptures, you pour out into people, blah, 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 blah. We want to ordain you. I said, ordain? No, this is too much. I said, I will do the stuff, just don't give me the title. Don't ordain me, I don't want it. They said, well, that's not going to happen. They said, we're going to ordain you. This was 2013. And they said, okay, cool. Invite your friends. Invite your girlfriend, who's my wife now. I said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to my own ordination on my ones. Nobody will know. So we went, ordained, we moved on. And for about 2-3 years, I never told anybody. No. I didn't even tell my girlfriend. I didn't tell my wife. When I told her a couple years ago, she got onto me. But the reason why I was doing it is because I was actually scared at the fact that people would look at me different. So, you get people who say, oh, yeah, well, you're a pastor. I didn't feel like I could come to talk to you anymore. And I feel like because of the title, I felt like, okay, people are just going to distance themselves. Well, that's part of the call. That's why I use the example of Mary. The angel of the Lord said, the favor of the Lord is coming upon you. The favor of the Lord was probably the harshest thing that could come on her, because she was now pregnant when she was betrothed to a man. So society are going to be like, wait, you guys, you're sleeping together. You're doing the most together, but you're not married. But yet the favor of the Lord is upon you. How does that work? Same with Elizabeth. The hand of the Lord is upon her and her husband, but she's barren. So I'm looking at myself now going, okay, cool. This must mean that this is probably going to be the most challenging thing that I have to accept, but I've got to accept it because that's what God has called me to. And so it's taken some years to really get into the reality of my assignment, because I've never wanted to be in someone else's shadows. But it's a constant journey. So when you said yes, it's a constant yes. For me, it is. That I've had to say, okay, God, you know what? Yes. Yes, this is what you've called me to, and I have to accept it.
Awesome. Because of time, I want to move on to the next subject matter, and I only want two of you to answer this one. So I think there's been an undertone of a lot of these guys coming to the end of themselves, God having to trace them up, having to find them. I want to talk about when you say yes and then you fail, how do you carry on saying yes? So for me, today is the 14th of December. Yesterday marked 4 years since my old church got closed down. That was probably the maddest time of my life, from December 14, up until March 15, 2015. I literally faced every demon that I thought I got delivered from in those 3 months. It was a mad 3 months. Depression, darkness, anything you can name it, it was there. But in the midst of it all, God was speaking to me about what I'm doing right now. And for me personally, that was torment. That was torment. It took my girlfriend, now wife, to drag me to church on March the 15th. And I'm telling you guys, if I didn't go to church that day, I don't know where I'd be now. There was a particular altar call that day. Answered it, said yes to God. And then from that on till now, it's been a journey of saying yes. But I want to talk about the fear of failure, because I think Emmanuel spoke about it this morning. I think I prayed it this morning. I think it's really a subject for this room right now, about the fear of failure. And even for some of us in this room, if not most of us, who have failed. How do we jump back from that failure and carry on saying yes?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go on.
So my uni experience, I spent 4 years in uni. 3 of those years, I failed every major module. And the mental battle was this, that on my mother's side, all her brothers struggled in their education. And so for me, I'm the firstborn. So when it got to uni, everything changed. I didn't feel as smart as I was before, and I was just failing consistently. Every major module, guys. First year, a miracle. God somehow brought me through. The second year, another miracle. The third year, they were like, look, Emmanuel, you've been playing games. You failed your first, you failed the second, and you want a blow on the third one. You're not getting this one. We're kicking you out. So they actually kicked me out on the third year. But supernaturally, somehow they had missed one of my courseworks. And when I had gone through everything, they were like, okay, cool, we're going to remark it. And that's how I got back in. This is how I was able to stay. because God reminded me of the word that he gave to me when I was 14 years old. I've called you to cities. I've given you a commission, and your mission is to save cities. And I was like, okay, well, this is education. I don't know if education is going to be it for me. And he's like, I'm showing you if I can build you through this, I'm going to build a foundation for you in ministry, in family, whatever looks like it's failing. If you can stick to that word, if you can hold on to that word, I will sustain you. So the third year, when I was kicked out and then it brought me back in, and I had to be real, and I said, this is the year where it ends with me. This is the year where whatever was following my uncles and from my mom's lineage and all of that, it ends with me. Because the promise to me must be established. And the fourth year was the year where literally I passed every module. But it was the promise of God that kept me. Failure, listen, it bugged me. It bugged me. Because I was like, why is it that up till now I'm flying colors in grades? Now I'm just failing everything. But it was the word that kept me. There's a scripture that the psalmist says, I would have fainted if it was not for the goodness of God in the land of the living. Literally, I fainted many times. But you know what? The righteous man falls many times, but he gets back up. It's because I said, you know what? This word is not just for me, it's for generations to come. So I'm going to be aggressive with the enemy, and I'm going to be aggressive in the spirit with the word that God has given me, and I'm going to fight for it. So anytime I face failures beyond that, after uni, couldn't find work, all of that kind of stuff, battling depression, I was reminded of the word. And it's that word that has literally sustained me. So when I get up, doesn't matter what my situation is, and I've been through a lot, but we're not here to talk about that today. I've been through many things. I've been through many trials. But it's the word of God that when I wake up, that says, you know what, Emmanuel, there's a future ahead. There's generations, there's cities ahead waiting. Don't give up on the promise.
You know, I'm going to say something to you as I listen to. You can imagine how many times I've failed if I've done this job, for how long I've done it. But I'm going to say something profound to you. I sat down here and I started thinking to myself, which failure, which one do you want to share? And how did you get over it? And I'm honest with you, I'm struggling to find a failure like that in my life. It's not that it doesn't exist. Then as I pondered, the Lord reminded me something. And I'm sharing this with you. The truth about why many of us are afraid of failure is because there's one thing you have to do in Christ. And I'm being honest with you, many of you have not done. You have not yet died. You just fainted. Are you hearing me? You did not, you're not yet dead. You fainted. And the day you will know that you are not dead yet, like the Bible says, that old man died, and a new man was what? Born. And it's not only you, it's the challenge of the church. We are not dying. And it's not just a one-off death. Like Paul said, I die daily. Almost like saying you say yes daily. What you're actually saying is, I die daily. Because when you, if you're like me from Africa or Nigeria, when you call home and some auntie or cousin or brother or sister begins to just think they can talk to you anyhow, or begin to push your boundaries beyond all manners of things because now you are a born-again Christian. And then you decided that, there is a madness in me that they sealed off in a bucket. And this woman is trying to open that bucket. And before you know it, or somebody even here in the UK begins to roll their tongue at you or do things that once upon a time nobody dares do it to you. That nobody dare even, and then somebody looks at you, swear, curse you, abuse you, cheat you like no man's business. And then suddenly you realize, I did not die. I fainted. Because the old man just comes alive. Like the mummy returns. You just come back again. And then you begin to swear like you never swear before. You are even ready to beat the light out of the person. Who do you think, And then suddenly, when you are finished, then you say, I did not die. And I'm telling you, friends, I'm learning that when you're dead, failure becomes rare.
Wow.
When you're dead, failure becomes what? Rare. Because a place of death is a place whereby there's no more fear. The things that you are afraid of is because you are not yet dead. The things you are afraid of is because you have not come to that place whereby, and what I mean by dead is a total surrender to God. That my life is no longer mine. It is His. And He will do it as He pleases. That's why you get to certain things. Some things don't bother you anymore. You used to be crazy. I only wear Nike. And then suddenly ministry takes you to a place whereby Nike. You wear anything. I got to the place whereby, listen, I was a designer. I designed clothes. I was so bad, I couldn't wear anybody's clothes. I had Liberians who stitched for me. As a teenager, I used to design clothes. Buy the materials, design it, and then they'll stitch. They're very good stitch. So my friends used to come to me. And that was how bad it was for me. Wear what? Somebody's, I don't care who you are. I did my own thing. And then, so you can imagine that kind of place where you are. And then when I had my first kid, I'm now a minister. And I have to look at going to buy that dress and designer clothes and Pampers. And whatever. You have to, that's when you know whether you are dead. So I'm telling you, stop fainting. Die proper.
One more person.
Yeah. After losing 90% of your church in one day, it was devastating. The amount of fear that gripped my life, I ran away. I ran, honestly. For 7 days, I didn't eat, just drank water, never came out my room, not actually understanding that I was battling depression. And all because I poured my life into this expression. And again, I had to relive the very thing I despised growing up was in my home, looking at me, facing it every day. I was so broken that I refused. In fact, I made a covenant with God. I would never abuse people from the platform because that's for cowards. Yeah. So I never threw stones. My messages were never aimed at people. However, because I was broken, because I was hurting, because this was my life investment, you must remember, I wasn't born in this nation. So it affected me differently. Psychologically, I was damaged. And sometimes this is what failure does. It damages your mind. So what I done was I began to become honest with God after. In fact, there was one of the guys in church that said, there's something happening in church we can't put our finger on because my wife protected me. She never said anything to anybody. And he says, I'm going to call a 7-day fast. It is like something lifted off of me after the 7 days. In saying that, this is where I learned God only meets you at the place of truth. Nowhere else. I love what Ayo was saying earlier on. Bring us back to the place where we're naked and not ashamed. So as long as I was ashamed, I hid. Because we had just gained momentum. We had just done an album. Our voice was starting to get out there, and all of a sudden it was cut short. Boom. God, what now? Where to from here? I made a decision for 4 months I'm not going to preach. I need to heal. I need to heal. I need deliverance. So I initiated a plan for our pastors in the house at the time. You'll preach. I'm training you, but what they didn't know was I wasn't in a place to preach. And I'm being real with you. There are times where we have to take the facade off, in the words of Shakespeare, unto thine own self be thy true. So sometimes we have to take the facade off, or we're gonna encounter the Mephibosheth syndrome, where we are at the table but we are crippled. And this only happens when we come to a place where God meets us at the place of truth. God, I am broken. God, I don't know where from here. I'm tired of pretending. I have missed it. Or so I think I have missed it. I entrusted my life to people. I gave them the confidence of me. And all of it gone. And it took me 2 years to recover. But the recovery, again, was a continuous yes. The recovery was not trying to run ahead of God, but to work in the momentum of God at that particular time. It wasn't a time to be prophesying. It was a time now, because in Ecclesiastes there's a time and there's a season for every deed under the sun. That time for me was to be brutally honest with God, where I had to look at myself in the Word. The Bible says the Word is likened to a mirror. And then I had to look at the mirror and allow the water of that Word to wash me. I had to allow the fire of the Word to purge me. I had to allow the Word to be honey again in my mouth, to soothe me again, so that I don't destroy the very thing God's called me to. And this is how the journey has been for me for the last 3.5 years, of dealing with loss, failure. Because most times, failure is an illusion. I'll say it again, most times, failure is an illusion, because we're on a rat race, on a treadmill of someone else's expectations. Failure is an illusion. So I want to encourage you men, don't run anyone's race. I've never shared my story up until today, but I want to encourage you with this. Even when you lose the greatest pearl that you have, don't shout it from the rooftops. Don't badmouth them. Love them. Honor them. Respect them. Bless them. Because in the words of Rev, Judith, do what you do and do it quickly. Because the healing comes quickly when you say, you know, God, I may have contributed to this. The healing comes quickly when we are honest. The deliverance comes quickly when we are honest. And God meets us at that point, nowhere else. That place is where breakthrough comes for you. And that's how you are able to quantum leap out of depression. Quantum leap out of cycles. Quantum leap out of failure. Quantum leap out of ancient demons. Quantum leap out of things that have secured and fortified your family into pain. Your struggle, your pain will diminish at the place of truth.